Buenos días. We are going to start the conference now, and we're going to start with Gerardo Ceballos. Gerardo Ceballos is there. Jason, can you check please the connection if you can connect Gerardo Ceballos? He's going to be our first keynote speaker. And Gerardo Ceballos is a researcher from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. He's one of the best known ecologists in Mexico. And recently I was reading some articles in different newspapers about his research on the 6th mass extinction of animals, of species that is occurring in the planet. And I was very impressed because honestly, before I haven't heard about his work, and I realized the importance of his work, and I immediately invite him to be part of this conference because I think his work is one of the most meaningful efforts that I have seen in terms of protecting nature and biodiversity in the planet. So Gerardo, I don't know if you are ready. Jason?
I am ready. Can you hear me? I am ready.
Yes, I am going to give you the microphone, and maybe after this I can make a couple of questions to you. And okay, now you are the one who is gonna take the microphone, and I am so honored that you are with us, and I am so proud that I am Mexican because you are Mexican, you know,
Thank you very much.
and that we have these amazing scientists like you in Mexico doing this amazing work, and I really wanna support what you are doing, and we're gonna make a couple of questions after your presentation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I hope everybody can see the screen. And well, I'm very honored to be here with you guys and to be invited to this important conference. Well, basically, I have, I told them I was going to talk about the 6th mass extinction, the biological annihilation, and the future of humanity. And I'm very honored to be here. And I think it's very important that I am allowed to talk to you and explain what we have done and what progress we have on understanding of what is happening on Earth and what will be the consequence, the possible consequences if this mass extinction continues unchecked. Aldo Leopold said that many years ago, that we live in a world of wounds. And as you can see, everywhere we look around, there are wounds on the environment, you know, street, houses, crops, and so many things that we have caused to the planet. And I will explain why we think we need to do a better work on protecting our planet. Just to quickly, I am a researcher at the National University of Mexico in the Institute of Ecology. And basically what I do there, that is a kind of unique among my colleagues, not only in Mexico, in most of the world, is that I do basic and applied research on ecology. I'm very interested in understanding how animals interact and how they interact among each other and then with the ecosystems. I basically work with mammals, big animals, but also other kinds of vertebrates. And what is also unique, as I said, is that I try that my work have impact on conservation. So we do a lot of conservation in situ in Mexico and other places throughout the world. In Mexico, I created with a lot of people, I push to create the first Endangered Species Act in the 1990s that now protects more than 4,000 species, has become a very important part. And then we create reserves. We work with local people. We work with the government. We work with the private industry and so on. And we also work with public policy. We have tried to create this, like the Endangered Species Act, new protected areas, the Commission on Protected Areas of the country, and so on. So we have to do the research, but we try to apply it to solve specific problems, and basically specific problems related to what is my passion, biodiversity. So this is what we do, conservation of endangered species, establishment of management of protected areas, conservation policy, and outreach. First, let me tell you that one of the important things that I learned in the last few years, when I was studying in the 1980s, we thought there were probably 50 million species on Earth, and most of them were small microorganisms. The new counts, they say it is possible there is up to 1 trillion species on this planet. And I will try to explain why it's important to have them around. And just to give you an example, in the last 10 years, we have discovered more, I mean, in the world, we have discovered more than 600 species of mammals. This is more than 10% of all the mammals are new to science. And these are not only small mouse or bats, shrews, are basically many animals, including monkeys. 60 species of monkeys have been described in the last 10 years. And amazing animals like this, you know, like on the top in the left, we have this fish that crawls, lives in caves and crawls out of the caves, and using the legs in a very similar way to what we think was the first amphibian, or this tiny fish from the Amazon, or on this fish that has a translucent skull and produces light in the bottom of the ocean to attract its prey. And I mean, really, really amazing things. All these species were found in just one single trip to the bottom of the ocean recently. They discovered the longest animal on Earth. It's kind of like a worm, 47 meters long. This is what is there, and this is what is endangered because of our activity. And as I said, we know probably 2% of the animals, large animals and plants, only 2%. Unfortunately, there is a fundamental problem that we're facing, and unfortunately too, is not well known. Fortunately now, most of the people on Earth knows that what's happening with the climate change and plastic pollution of plastic on the oceans and so on. But there is a really little understanding that we are passing a really unprecedented extinction crisis. That is probably the most urgent environmental problem, because extinction of a species is the only irreversible environmental problem. Once you lose a species, there is no way we can bring it back. And with enough time, climate change, pollution could be solved in hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, but extinction cannot. So why we are here, why we're in this particular situation? Well, we know there are severe global environmental problems, and all of them has to do with the three basic ultimate problems that are human population growth. We're still growing, you know, as if the resources were unlimited, the inequity on the distribution of resources between countries and among countries, consumption, and the efficiency of technology. We're still using inefficient technology like fossil fuels and so on. All of those have caused things like global climate disruption, habitat loss, overexploitation, emerging diseases, invasive species toxifications, and so on. And this has caused the sixth mass extinction. And the sixth mass extinction, and I say it's incredibly important because from all these plants and animals depends the ecosystem services and goods that are essential to keep life on Earth and to keep human life on this planet. So years ago, we and my colleagues at the Stanford University asked this question: are we in the current extinction? The current extinction rates are the normal, like in the past history of life on Earth, or we're entering the sixth mass extinction? And let me tell you that this is a very important question, because what the species that we're losing are at the same rate that we have lost them in the last million years, we shouldn't worry about it. It will be like a natural process. But if we're losing those species at faster rates, it means that we are causing an acceleration of this extinction. So we start to work and look at compile the data, we find out that almost 1,000 vertebrate species has become extinct in the last 500 years, most of them in the last 100 years. Things like the dodo that we all know, that the passenger pigeon, the Tasmanian wolf. So the passenger pigeon, for instance, the most abundant species probably on Earth, it was this particular flock was counted by Audubon, and the flock passes for 2 days and nights, and it was 2 billion animals, 2 billion animals in the 1840. By the end of the century, they were gone, they were extinct. So in the previous 700 million years, there has been 5 mass extinctions. Mass extinctions are defined by scientists. Sorry, we define them as very catastrophic events that between 70 to and more than 70% of all the plants and animals were destroyed by a natural catastrophe, like the impact of a meteorite on Earth, and was geologically very fast, thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. So comparing the extinction rates from the last 60 million years, the normal extinction rates, to the current ones, what we find out, these are the 5 previous ones. You will see that it's like a normal rate, and suddenly these are these peaks on extinction. And basically what we found, and we published in this paper in Science, is that in the last 500 years in general, but more in the last 100 years, we have lost a species at a massive increased rate than the normal rate. If you see this is the cumulative number of species lost, and this is what will be the background, the normal rate of extinction, this line. So if the extinction happening right now were like the same, like in the previous 65 million years, we will have here along this line, we will find the line. What we see here, on the other hand, is for all the animals, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, or all the vertebrates, we have a massive increase on extinction. So first of all, based on our research, we were the first group that could show, based on solid data, that we have entered a 6 mass extinction, because the current rates are hundreds of times faster than the previous year, the previous race on the last million years. And what you can see on the right, you will see that this is perfect correlation, basically almost one correlation, one point correlation between human population and the cumulative rate. So there is no doubt that this extinction, because of these two facts, is caused by us, by humans. So a species lost in the last 100 years should have been lost in 10,000 years in normal times. In other words, the current extinction rate is at least 100 times faster than the previous, than the normal extinction rate. So it means that our activity, we have accelerated this extinction in massive terms. We just finished the new data, analysis of the new data, and unfortunately, our results shows that with the better data, the species lost in the last 100 years should have been lost in 20,000 years. And just imagine, when we talk about 10,000 years, these numbers are so big that they become like trivial, because 10,000 years ago, humans, there were no agriculture, there was no cities like we know them now, there was basically nothing. The big push of humanity to where we are now has happened in only 200 years. And we're talking here in 10,000 years, so the species that we lost in 100 years should have been lost in at least 10,000 years. That's the scale, that's the magnitude of the problem. But then there is something that is even more urgent than the species extinction, but because of species extinction, one species become extinct when all the populations are lost. So we have focused on the population extinction, and what we have found that this is the real crisis right now is the loss of populations, because we could have a hypothetical example where we didn't lose any species, but we could end up with just one population of each species on Earth, and we will be in serious problems, as I will explain in a minute. So population extinction is much more severe than species extinction by definition, because each species has several populations. And these are the kind of data that start become now available and are really shocking because of the magnitude. 60% of all the vertebrate individuals has been lost since 1980. 60% of all the vertebrate individuals, of the animals, have been lost in the 1980s. And for some species, as much are even worse. There were 10 million elephants in 1900. 10 million elephants in 1900. There were around almost 1 million elephants in 1950, and there are only now 250,000. So we create this term, biological annihilation, to indicate the loss of population, the loss of species, and the loss of the structure and function of all these species in ecosystems, with the consequences that this has for life on Earth in general, and for human life in particular. So this is what we call, has been an unprecedented assault on nature, and these are the case of the elephants. As I was telling you, right now there are around 250,000 elephants, and we're losing around 8% of the population every year. So if we continue the decline as it is possible that there will be no wild elephant in 10, 15 years. There is an elephant is being killed illegally every 15, 17 minutes. All the time, all the days, all the months, every year. So, but the annihilation, the biological annihilation, is not only, when we publish these papers, people will say, some of the scientists will say, of the deniers, say, well, this is happening with the big animals. This is not happening with the invertebrates. But then data came from many studies, and this particular one, for instance, in Germany, 75% of the biomass, insect biomass, were lost in national parks that's supposed to be protected in Germany in 27 years. So we know what are the drivers of this problem: population growth, consumption, inefficient technology. We can see here in this graph the human population growth. I don't have to tell you that any population, in terms of biological terms, any population that grows like this has only two possible outcomes: either become stable or collapse. Those are the good news, in the sense that if we do what we have to do, we can try to stabilize the human population. But the other alternative, if we don't do radical changes in the next couple of decades maximum, then we are collapse of civilization, then we are collapse of the population with everything. And obviously population growth is related to consumption, we consume too much, and to inefficient technologies. So some of these are like the ultimate drivers, the proximate drivers of the extinction crisis is when a habitat loss for many reasons, for agriculture, for cattle, for massive industrial uses. Here we see in this map on the right, these are the areas that are mostly completely used for agriculture or cattle grazing and so on. And what we can see, there is very little area on the planet because this is too cold, this is too dry. And now this map I created, I took it from the literature around 2000. So it has even changed words. As you can see, for instance, here, Borneo, when we was done, has still most of its forests. Now they are gone. The Amazon has a lot of forests. Many have been gone. El Congo, many forests have been gone. So the other horrific thing happening, and I will explain why it's so important to us, is overexploitation and illegal trade. This you can see this is a pangolin and its baby. Pangolins are mammals. Sorry, pangolins are mammals that have the body covered with the scales. The scales are made what the keratin, the same thing like our fingernails. And for some stupid reason, have been they think they are being publicized to have beneficial uses in traditional medicine, both of the animals, the corpse, as food, and the scales. And you can see here, this was called the pangolin pit. The person who took the photograph, when he came and saw that, he fainted. There were more than 3,000 pangolin dead in a confiscated, I think this was in Indonesia. It's supposed to be that 1 million of these species of pangolins are illegally traded every year. Let me tell you, I have traveled extensively in Africa and Asia in my work as a biologist, and I have been able to see only one in the wild. How can you get 1 million every year? This illegal trade is devastating human local communities and the wildlife, and has really very impact in humans, as I will explain. So climate disruption, we have seen already here, the good news is human cause, we all know that. And it's good news because if we cause it, we can identify the problem, what is causing it, and we can try to solve it. If climate disruption will be natural and will be happening like that, there will be nothing we could do. We're approaching, both in terms of biodiversity and climate disruption, very, very difficult times, because we're approaching tipping points where the consequences could be so bad and it will be almost impossible to reverse them. So we have little time to do it. And basically, the other thing is like we have all these changes that occur in the environment are increasing the likelihood of abrupt changes that we couldn't perceive. And we hear the collapse of the Atlantic stocks of the cod. And you can see, like in 1970s, we reach almost 800,000 tons of the catch, and the collapse was really, really abrupt. In 1992, the fishery was extinct, and the animals were almost extinct. There are now very, very few left. So I'm always asked, why does it matter to lose all these plants and animals? I mean, people say, well, we understand they are beautiful, they are nice, but we need to feed the people. We need to have houses on more wood. We need to have more clothes. We need to have more stuff for people, food, houses, infrastructure, water, and so on. And well, the most important thing for why this is matter is because all these plants and animals provide what we scientists call now environmental services. Environmental services are those essential services, essential benefits that we get free from nature and are required to maintain life on Earth. And think about this. There are more celestial bodies in the universe than sun grains on all the ocean. I mean, this is almost incomprehensible. How can be more celestial bodies, planets, galaxies, than grains, signs of grains on the sea? And among this gigantic number of celestial bodies, there is only one place on the whole universe that we know there is life, and it's Earth. And we know that there is life on Earth because of the wild plants and animals that live here. And those ecosystem or environmental services are essential for having life on Earth. They are essential for have all the, for instance, the proper combination of the gases of the atmosphere to have life on Earth depends on the plants and animals. the quality and quantity of fresh water, the pollination of all our crops and all wild plants pollinated by animals, or the protection against diseases and against natural problems are required by, we need the plants and animals. And I was thinking about this, usually I give this example of why we need them. When people say, oh, there are so many animals and plants, why we care about them? And let's think that you can see behind me there is this wall, and this wall is made by bricks. And let's think like when I take a brick, one of these bricks, and suppose it's a species, the whole wall won't collapse, but it will start to work less properly. There will be more noise, more humidity, more dust, and so on, more noise. And if I start to take many of those bricks, eventually the wall will collapse. And this is what is happening in nature. We have seen now that because of the losing so many plants and animals, we're losing the capability of the natural ecosystems to maintain their function, and with that to maintain the quality of the conditions of all these functions that are required for human and for animals. And I give you an example that the right. Can you hear me?
Yes. Now we can hear you.
Sorry. Okay. So what I was saying that then the coronavirus is linked on the one hand to wildlife trade, and wildlife trade is linked to species extinction. So we know, and scientists working on zoonotic diseases, they know that in the last 40 years, there has been around 50 outbreaks of new emerging diseases caused by viruses and bacteria, which are originated in wild animals, and has been put in contact to humans and and domestic animals because of the wildlife trade and because of habitat destruction. And the COVID-19, it is now perfectly has been found that the origin is illegal trade, wildlife trade. And this is one of the possibilities on the left of where this could possibly come. We know its origins is from bats, and bats probably it jumped probably to pangolins and then to humans, or it jumps to humans and then to pangolins and so on. But it's the origin of this coronavirus is unequivocally a wild species. And unfortunately, we are wiping out this species, and we are creating these pandemics, these epidemics and pandemics. I was, for instance, in 2013, I published a paper that I said that this was going to happen unless we could curb the illegal trade. And many other of my colleagues published similar things. Unfortunately, there wasn't a reaction to try to do that. And let me give you just an idea of the gigantic trade, and this is both legal and illegal. So the consumption of wild species is unthinkable. Just in China, over 1 million individuals of wild animals are used every year for food, for the traditional medicine and pets, generating $74 billion in profits. 74 billion, sorry, $74 billion dollars is more than all the meat market in the US. And most of this trade is illegal. And most of this trade is illegal and impoverishes the local communities in Africa, in South America, in Asia. And it's been driven by really nasty, really violent mafias, Chinese mafias and local mafia throughout the world. So let me give you some examples of what we think, what we call environmental services. This is a complicated diagram, but let me just tell you that by losing elephants and large herbivores in Africa, in Kenya, yeah, what it causes is an increase in the loss of many consumers, plants, and animal interaction. But probably most important for human, it's when you lose the herbivores, the elephants and giraffe and zebras, for instance, the grasses grow up much larger, and then the species of rodents who are being, whose populations are being limited by these large herbivores increases, and those rodents have between 8 to 12 really deadly diseases for humans. So who will think that by losing elephants, you will increase the number of species that cause really nasty diseases for humans? And we all know these kind of things. This is in Mexico. In Mexico, we were able to stop law years ago that we allowed mangroves to be destroyed for housing shrimp farms and crops. And there were 17 governors and the president who wanted to this law to pass. And we got together with the fisheries industry, because we were able to explain the fisheries industry that in the mangroves, 95% of the commercial species of the fisheries breed on the mangrove. So they joined with us, we fight, and we were able to stop this law. Now you can put your housing, your shrimp farms, your crops just behind the mangrove. And the mangrove, what we have learned is that it will give you protection, aside from being the nursery for all these species and for many other things of biodiversity, it will also protect you against a hurricane, storms, flooding, and so on. So we know that it's incredibly important that ecosystems, proper ecosystems, forests and tropical forests and temperate forests are essential to keep the biochemicals, how to say that, to keep the water, the potable water, drinkable water, to avoid big natural problems like flooding and so on. So most of us sometimes we don't think about it's so obvious, and we have grown up looking at those plants and animals and those ecosystems that we haven't think that all the benefit that we get from them, you know. And for the production of our crops and our food supply, is incredibly important to keep all these animals, because 75% of the crop for humans are pollinated by animals. It's not only the honeybees, it's the native bees, are moths, are in other kinds of insects, even bats. For instance, bats are essential to keep the genetic variability of and the pollination of agaves, and that produce mezcal, for instance, or tequila. And obviously, as I said, with the COVID, we also get protections against diseases like that. Just one cave in southern Mexico has 3 million insectivorous bats. Each bat will eat 1 or 2 grams of insects every night. And many of those insects are pests to crops. So just imagine the value of having 3 million bats coming out every day, all the months, all the years, eating all these insects, saving us from many diseases, saving us from disaster in our crops, and so on. So we're facing this gigantic crisis. Based on our study, we think that there is no more, well, based on our projections and on our studies, and so far the projections that we have done since 1990 has been very, very unfortunately been mostly correct. And I say unfortunately because we predicted the loss of so many plants and animals. We predicted that we will be in a very dire situation by 2020, and here we are facing those predictions. And what we think now is that there is no more. On the one hand, there is still time, that's the good news. But the window of time, the window of opportunity to maintain all these plants and animals that are essential to keeping the conditions of life for most animals and plants on Earth and for humans in particular is closing. We think that whatever we say in the next 15 years is what will be said. So in other words, we think the next 10, 15 years are crucial to save the plants and animals that are the basis for having life on Earth. And this is really, we think this is the most important challenge that humanity has faced, except perhaps for a nuclear holocaust. And unfortunately, most of us, most of the people, most of the governments, most of the corporations are unaware of the scale, of the magnitude of the problem and its consequences. So this decade, 2020, 2030, is essential, is critical for humanity and for life. And at the end, I will say that what is at stake is the survival of most living creatures, and what is at stake is the survival of humanity. Unless we change and do an effort with no precedent in the history of humanity to save our living companions, the consequences will be gigantic. And I like to finish my talk with this phrase from Jean Dors. Jean Dors was a naturalist from France. He wrote this book, Before Nature Dies, in 1968. And if you go and look at the book, he basically is talking about all the problems that we have now: population, human population growth, consumption, erosion, overfishing, illegal trade, and so on. He was really a visionary. And he said, nature will only be safe if man loves it, simply because it's beautiful. For that too, is an integral part of the human soul. Now, more than ever, we need to show some empathy, some love to nature, to do what we have to do to save all these plants, all these animals, all these ecosystems. And paradoxically, by doing that, we are saving ourselves. Thank you.
Gerardo, thank you so much for your presentation. And now we have time for Q&A. If people in the public, they have some questions, we're gonna give them to Dr. Gerardo Ceballos. And also, we would like to remind you that Bandana Shiva is gonna be live in around 30 minutes from now. We have 30 minutes for questions and answers. And I have some questions for Gerardo. Well, the first question is, Gerardo, can you tell us when was the moment in which you realized that you would like to become an ecologist, and why?
Yes, of course. Well, I knew I've been asked this question and before, and since I was very small, a small child, my parents say that I say that I wanted to study animals. And when I was 11 years old, I got a book. It's called The Last Curlew, and it was a novel about the last two Eskimo curlews, who are some birds who used to make a gigantic migration from the Arctic to Patagonia. And I read it. It was a novel. There were two of them left on Earth, and one of them is killed. So the male arrives to the Arctic and stay there all the summer singing along. And it gave me so much anxiety when I read that book, thinking that I could go wandering around Earth, Mexico, cities and towns and small households without finding anybody but me. And at that time, I decided that I wanted. I learned that to study animals was a biologist, and then I decided to be a biologist to try to save species. I was very young, and that book marked my life. And then when I studied biology, and then I decided to study ecology because I knew that to save a species, we will need to understand how they work, what was the value, what were the requirements, and so on. So I did my PhD on that. And when I come back to Mexico, I make this, what I think was a very good decision of doing basic research on ecology and then link it to conservation.
And the second question that I have for you, because you know we started at some point with some kind of interest in something. I wonder if you would like to show yourself, to show to turn on your camera, and so people can see you in person, who you are, you know. And I think for many people would like to meet you, you know. If we can see your face in
Yes,
the
yes,
screen.
I tried to put it earlier, but I couldn't. Yes,
Okay, perfect.
here I
In the
am.
meantime, Jason is gonna gather a couple of questions. Mark Squire is there. He's gonna be gathering a couple of questions from the public. But the second question that I have for you, because you told me about this campaign that you're gonna launch next year, and
Yeah.
to stop the mass extinction. How we can get involved? Like it's not, because many people they see the problem very big. You know, when somebody asks me, do you are you afraid of the melting of the Arctic? I say no, because I am doing what I can every day. I'm sorry for those who are not doing anything in the last moment. I don't know. How do you feel? Do you feel even sometimes, do you feel afraid of what's going on with the species? How do you
No,
feel
no,
yourself, like
definitely.
emotionally, psychologically, dealing with this?
Definitely, I feel many times a gigantic burden on this issue. It is a existential threat for humanity, and just imagine that we have been talking about this for so many years, and sometimes I think we're a failure because we haven't been able to convey this problem to a larger audience. So 3 years ago, we published this paper, the one on biological annihilation. It became viral. It was seen in New York Times, Le Monde, everywhere. Somebody estimated that 100 million people got exposed to the idea within 1 month. And I decided, we have done a lot of conservation in Mexico, but we understand that it's not enough. So we have been working for the last year in putting this campaign. Is called Stop Extinction. It will probably be called eventually People versus Extinction. And it is a campaign you will see very soon, within the next few months, what we're doing. But right now, if you go to our webpage, www.stopextinctions.org, you will see what is the campaign. The campaign has 4 components. On the one hand, first of all, it's a big component in international policy. We want Stop Extinction to be a catalyzer of so many other actions being done by thousands of millions of people and companies and organizations already on conservation, but hasn't been put like in a global framework in such a way that people understand what is happening and what can be done. So the first thing is the international policy. We cannot continue with illegal trade, legal and illegal trade of wildlife as it is now. China has agreed to stop and ban some of the illegal trade going to its markets that has caused this COVID and is likely to cause many other pandemics unless it is stopped. Vietnam has done the same. So Stop Extinction will help these policy changes to happen. So the second thing is that we have built a large data set. We have now, you can go on our website and you can see the distribution of all the land vertebrates on Earth. with a click. You can see with a click and see the distribution of all the mammals, birds, amphibians, and reptiles in one map. Or you can see one species, or you can see the animals in one country and what are in danger, or in a particular region in any place on Earth. So we think with that, it will be a very valuable tool. It's free for anybody who wants to know what is at stake in the region. And we have done partnerships with other conservation groups, and the idea is that eventually we can raise $1 billion to help many organizations, especially small organizations, on the one hand, to get enough funding for what they are doing, but the second, to publicize what's going on. We are going to launch this campaign, People versus Extinction, and we will use the V sign, okay? As when we do the V signs, remember in Second World War was victory, then was peace and love. Now we want to retake it, to mention every time we do something like that, it will be, I am against extinction. So the idea, and we were going really fast, but COVID has slowed us down, and it's an international one. I have the fortunate to be able to be working with one philanthropist who has want to push this at a scale that has a different scale. And the idea is that within the next 3 years, everybody on Earth knows that the species extinction is as bad as climate change on the one hand. And also you will see there, and you can see there now, even in our webpage, that on the one hand, this is we feel these big problems become so overwhelming that we shut down completely. But what we are giving is raising the awareness and empowering people, corporations, and countries to do things. There are many success stories, and we will tell them in Stop Extinction, that there are many communities, there are many species being saved, many habitats being saved, not at the scale that we need, but there is a lot of things happening. So we want the public, we want the countries, we want the corporations to know that there are things to be done. And finally, we think that if the campaigns, we manage to push the campaign at the scale that we want, it will be very easy to help all these other organizations and other groups and other efforts for conserving to gain momentum in their regions, in their countries, because everybody will be much more aware of the problem. This is, if this works, it will be a movement at the scale of the climate change movement.
Great. I think that many people are very involved in talking about climate change. We have done conferences around GMOs, different kind of stuff. But besides the Extinction Rebellion, I haven't seen a lot of people working on the mass extinction that I think we are going to be part. And I have heard that when a species reach this quantity of individuals, it can be 25,000 or 30,000, but they are in the point of no return. And I have heard that maybe humans, even if we are 8 billion people, maybe we still are in the point of no return because we are not going to survive. There are no conditions. Maybe because we don't have the resources to survive, because and it's going to collapse the whole population, even if we are too many. Can you explain to us how it works?
Well, I mean, yes, basically the important point about the population extinction is that when a species becomes so rare that has less than 1,000 individuals, it's a stop. It's the role they used to have in the ecosystems. So, but it doesn't mean that we cannot save it. So the idea is that in terms of the extinction, that we reverse the data, that we change the conversation in the sense that there is still time to save many species, many ecosystems. And but as you said, if we don't do it, and we don't do it soon, in the next decade, 10, 15 years, there will be, unfortunately, I think, no way that to avoid a collapse of civilization. Because remember, we're losing all these species first, but now there will be the wave, the big wave of climate disruption unfolding at this full scale. And so if you put the species extinction and then climate change and then pollution and then toxification, and then it will be probably too much for ecosystem. So, but we think that working for a species stopping extinction and saving species and ecosystem is something also that people relate much easier than with climate change on the one hand, but it's also saving this species and this ecosystem doesn't require that we change the whole economic or political or social system of the world. This will have to happen, but it will give us time to do a lot of progress while the other changes are happening. And there've been studies, many studies showing that human population will stabilize a little bit more than 8 billion people instead of 11 billion that it was the scenario before. So I'm optimistic in the sense that we still have time. There is the COVID, unfortunately, with all the suffering and all the deaths and all the people having problems and the economic problems that will come after this, the disease is being tamed, controlled, is a great opportunity to show how by treating the way we're treating nature, destroying habitats and destroying animals and plants and so on, is very stupid. It's something will only cause more suffering and eventually our demise. So the idea, I'm optimistic that there are many important success stories, and there is still time. And when I feel kind of overwhelmed, I'm just thinking how much progress we have done in the last few years, even when the conditions have not been good in terms of the political, economic, or social terms in the world. Our countries are becoming much more nationalistic, much more close, more ruled by radical guys, by fascists, or leaders who have not the quality that we need at this time. But I think this is just temporal. It will change. It will change soon. The world cannot survive those guys, and I think societies and the whole thing, it will shift. My goal, my dream, but I think there is a lot of support on these ideas, is that coming out from this horrific pandemic will push the world towards being more just in social terms and more sustainable in environmental terms. This is the critical thing. We need to make it more equal, the world for humans, and we need to be sustainable. We have to understand that we need to maintain all these plant and species. And I think a lot of signs that we're going in the right direction, although the conditions right now are probably the worst for these changes to happen. I think they're going to happen.
I would like to know again, or if you can repeat again your website, and also I wonder how we normal people that are not researchers or scientists like you, how we can help. Last time you told me about when I told you that I am living in Chiapas in San Cristóbal de las Casas, you asked me about the flying squirrel that is in
squirrel, yes.
So, yes, that is from this area. So I wonder if, I think many of us, we are very curious about what kind of species are in our localities. I wonder if exists a map in which we can identify places that maybe are close to our locations where there are some species in extinction, and if we can adopt them, like something symbolic, the same way that we adopt the monarch butterfly, and we've been talking about the right to migrate and all this stuff. Maybe if we would know the names and the locations of these species, would be great.
Well, that's part of the Stop Extinction on our database. Now you can go, soon you will be able to go and click in the region of San Cristobal de las Casas, and you will get all these species there, all the vertebrates that are there, and you can click and see which one are in danger and so on. This is happening soon. You will be able to do that soon. And sorry, and well, if you to start with, I mean, what I will say, we all have to become actors, and you have to become actors at your local scale and at the scale that you can do it. On the one hand, for instance, if you go to the internet and you click and say 50 ways to help the environment, you will find many ways to do it. For instance, don't use animals, wild animals as pets. Don't buy anything that has to do related to the illegal or legal trade of animals. Be very careful if you can. The people that is more affluent buy things that are not related to, for instance, palm oil that is destroying forests in Mexico or in Indonesia and so on. Get involved, locally involved. I was looking at the San Cristobal de las Casas, for instance, where you live, that Coca-Cola wanted to put a plant there and extract some of the water. And let me tell you that in the small lake around there that you can see in San Cristobal, there is an endemic genera of genus of fish from Mexico. It's a tiny fish, the fish that live in those wetlands, basically in the city of San Cristobal, is endemic to there. There is found nowhere else. So get involved. And for instance, if Coca-Cola wants to put a plant there, it doesn't mean that you have to close the Coca-Cola. It means that you have to sit down and do the proper studies to find out where to put it, how much can you they produce, and so on. So use science to direct our actions. What you say is very important. Become involved, locally involved, to save as much habitat as possible, and join the municipality, join the private industry, join the local communities, whomever wants to protect their areas, and help them to do that. And I think by the way we consume, I think that the way we took our actions on what we buy and what we don't buy, if we use plastic or not, if we don't have pets, wild animals as pets and so on, we can make a big, big impact locally. Organize with the group of people who wants to do something, and create a small reserve, work with the local people and create reserve with them so they keep their habitat and they get benefits from keeping those habitats. And then get involved in policy, and get involved, vote for the right people, vote for the right guys who are supporting the environment, push the local legislation so you have a better development zoning in San Cristobal and other places. So the idea is that with the access to internet, we can really, if we're interested, research and get many, many ideas on how to help endangered species. And in our website, it is being built, it is being developed, but you can see many things now. And you will see many ways to help. It's www.stopextinctions, plural, stopextinction.org. And you'll see, it is very interesting. We have starting to have a lot of interesting information. And the database, for instance, with our database, we were able to say what animals could be very endangered by the fires in Australia, for instance, last year, at the end of the last year. And we produced the data, we produced the maps, and we were able to produce the maps, very good maps, 3 weeks before the Australian government. So just imagine that Chad or Mexico or Chiapas or anyone wants to have information on their wildlife right now. Eventually with plants and other species. You can do it using our database.
Great. Now I would like to take a couple of questions from the attendees. I read before that somebody was talking about the mangroves and carbon sequestration. And I wonder if you can tell us something about it, because we are talking about climate change as well, And we have heard that, for example, one tree can store 1 ton of carbon in its life. So I wonder what is the function of mangroves, you know, and what is also the state of mangroves, for example, in Mexico, or in areas with high, very, very touristic areas, you know, in Mexico or other places.
Well, everywhere, the mangroves everywhere are in danger. They have been basically almost wiped out in all the Pacific, in the Americas. The largest mangroves are left in Mexico. Mangroves regions are in Mexico and Costa Rica and so on. Mangroves are incredibly important because are an ecosystem that is between land and sea. Is the ecotone between land and sea. And the more we learn about them, the more we know their importance. They are incredibly important to store, as you say, carbon. They are important because they are nurseries for many species of marine species, and many of the species that are very important in the fisheries industry, you know, streams and fishes and so on. They are also very important to help us to protect us against natural storms or hurricanes, the tsunamis. There is a really interesting observation when the tsunami in Asia, the one who destroyed part of Sumatra, northern Sumatra in the Aceh region, it also came through the ocean and then hit some places in India. So next to the coast of India, there were several islands, and islands who have their coral reefs in good shape and their mangroves in good shape, and islands who have destroyed the coral reef and have destroyed the mangroves. So when the tsunami came, it killed many of the people in the area, in the islands that have destroyed the coral reefs and the mangroves. But in the islands who were the mangroves, there were very few people, dead people. And it is because if you have the mangrove like here, you know, and you have here the waves coming up, first of all, just in mind they hit all the force, destroy mangroves, but they lose most of the force coming up. So when they enter the cities and the towns, they flooded them, but they didn't destroy them. So they are very important for all these functions, you know. And what is interesting, what we managed to do in Mexico, and it works more or less fine, is that instead of destroying the mangrove, you leave it there, and then behind the mangrove, you can put the shrimp farms, and you can put the housing or the crops and so on, and the mangroves will help you against these natural storms and problems. And on the other hand, you will maintain the function that provides for the marine ecosystems. One thing we have to learn is that there is no way that we can have conservation without development. And there is no way we can have development without conservation. And there is some development that cannot happen in certain areas, you know. And there is some conservation, it cannot happen in certain areas. We cannot say, oh, let's conserve Mexico City and get the people there. But basically now we have the science and technology to do a much better work of compiling, of making compatible certain kinds of development and certain kinds of conservation. What we are proposing, for instance, in Stop Extinction, is that the investment for conservation and thinking conservation as one way of development. If you have a continuum of development of areas intensively used, like cities of intensive croplands, and then on the other extreme, you have reserves, it is very, very important to understand that we need to do a much larger effort, a much larger investment on protected areas. We think that we need to invest between $200 to $400 billion on conservation in the next 10, 15 years. And it may sound a lot of money, but if you think it's a tiny percentage of the economy of the world. It's, and by doing that investment, we can save the conditions of the planet to save most of the wildlife, most of the biodiversity on the one hand, and most of the and humanity on the other hand. So what we have to do now is to make the publicize and work with the leaders and work with the institutions who are related to that. So an effort of this magnitude can be done. If we do that, and we hope and we think that is feasible, we will be able to make a massive positive impact on conservation. And I think I will finish that. Just imagine that if the whole economy of the world is several $1 trillion, and we're talking about $200, $300, $400 billion. And it's like if I say to somebody who has $100 that he has to put 20 cents of the $100 or $1 of the $100 to save his life. I think everybody will say, yes, I will put the $1 to save my life. And this is what this is the kind of campaign that we need to do. And we're starting to do soon.
Gerardo, thank you so much. We hope in the future to host some webinars, like monthly webinars or every 2 months, so you can join us again, keep us updated on the campaign. And we want to support the campaign. So not all coalition is going to be part of the Stop Extinction campaign next year. In any way we can contribute, we can help. And I'm sure that we're going to meet here in Mexico. Eventually, to talk a little about it. I was talking with Sandra Khan, with Adelita San Vicente Tello. They all are very impressed with your work. I am very impressed with your work. And I am so honored that you was today with us. And thank you so much again. And
thank you very much to everybody. And congratulations for doing this forum. And I will be very happy to get the organization working with us, becoming a partnership. When we're ready to do that soon, I will be honored that you become our partner with the Stop Extinction and we do things together, okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.